one of the questions I get all the time is, which practice paper should I use? Should I use a grid? Should I use a dotted practice paper? Or should I use lined or blank? So first of all, you don't use rough paper. You use smooth paper, that's special practice paper, like in these pads. The other thing is you don't use blank paper, okay? So lined, dot, or grid, and what is the difference? Honestly, it's just personal preference. I guess my favorite would have to be the grid. So why do I like the grid? Let me just zoom in. I like the grid because I like to see the lines. So the measurements of the grid, let me just show you with this ruler, is, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares per inch, or 5 squares for 2.5 centimeters, all right? That is kind of the measurement of a traditional or typical grid paper. Now, the dot paper right here, I don't know, can you see the dots? Yes. So the dot paper is the same as the grid paper in terms of measurements, except the intersections of the grid are the dots. There are no lines. So the measurements of these papers are the same. So if I have 5 spaces on the dot grid, it would be 5 squares on the regular grid. Why do I like this one or this one? Some people don't like all the lines. They like the dots because they're not as well visible, actually. So I'll just grab my Dream Pen, and let's say I'm writing the word hello. So for me, I want an X height of about 3 or 4 or 5 squares high. And I personally have to really focus to see where those guidelines are in terms of the dots. What do I mean by that is I have a baseline, which would be this line. I have a waistline, which is this line of dots. So as I'm writing, I cannot really see, let me zoom in. I have trouble seeing the dots for these imaginary lines. And that's why you'll often see me practicing with them. You can even see I went a little bit over. Practicing by drawing these lines in, and this is my ascender line here. Whereas the grid paper, I see the lines more easily. So let me just scooch this over. Right here. Oops, there. Okay, so if I am writing the word hello on my grid paper, to me, I will see this line instead of seeing the dots. It's just easier for me. And then 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, it would be this height. And then I moved up to 4 for my ascender loops. So you determine what your guidelines are. But if I'm using grid paper and I am practicing, I am going to draw my lines in addition to seeing them. And it's easier for me to draw on these grid lines than it is for me personally to connect the dots on the dotted paper. Now, I'm nothing against dotted paper. I still use it, but I just find for me the grid is kind of my go-to. All right, so what then do you do with lined paper? The lined paper has kind of a totally different, it's very special. My lined paper is kind of a special format because, in terms of measurements, it is the right height for both large and small brush pens, particularly the large brush tip pens. So here's my Dream Pen, and no matter which side I'm working with, this is the larger side and this is the smaller side. Both I find I use at this height, and this would be my X height. So the X height is for the lowercase letters without ascenders or descenders, right? So this X height is perfect for me with this line paper. So this is my large tip, and let me flip it over and do my smaller tip. It's still large. I still like this height for that size of a letter. And for me, I usually, for my ascenders and descenders, I simply double this X height. So that's why I like these lined papers. Some people have taller ascenders or longer descenders, so this paper might not be totally great for you, but for me, I love using it because of that reason. I just simply double that height or double for my descender. So let me draw a descender with the letter G. And I am using the smaller end of my Dream Pen, but it doesn't matter. So this is how I use my lined paper with my large brush pens. For my small brush pens, I still use my lined paper, but now my X height is going to be half of that. So I will just move this up and show you what I mean. And half of that doesn't really have a line. So my X height is half. So when I use this paper to practice, I am actually imagining this halfway line. Now, I know a lot of people, here I'll just draw my, my ABC. A lot of people actually do like to have those lines visible. So what I do is I recommend that they use a ruler and they find that midpoint for their X height, or it could be lower. Like, remember, this is just my tendency. So my ascender loops are often a little bit higher than that line for with my small brush pens. So if they could choose it halfway, and now I can't see with this ruler what is halfway, but I'm gonna try. Oh, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna measure like this. So I'll measure, no, I'm gonna use this side. Oh, I still can't tell what's halfway. Okay. I'm gonna guesstimate. This is where you need a clear ruler. I'm gonna guesstimate the halfway point. Anyways, you get what I mean by adding your own halfway point. And it can be a solid line, a dotted line, whatever you want. Oh, that wasn't too bad. All right, and then you can practice your strokes and letters at this height. Ideally, I find that the line paper works a little bit better with my larger brush tip pens. If I drew a little bit smaller, I would have taller ascender loops like this, and I could adjust my X height in whatever way I like. No matter what, try out the different papers, see what you prefer, and I mean, sure, you can use grid paper like I do, but it might not be your favorite. You might prefer the line paper. You might want to practice with your large brush tip pens only on line paper and use your grid paper for all-round practicing. So smooth paper has to be have lines of some kind or dots, and have fun practicing. Thanks for watching.